Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Hyams here and the always subdued Bob Stewart over there. Bob, how are you today?
You they can't see you, but you got one of these, like, I call it like a shit-eating grin on your face.
Grin,
you know? Yeah, you're just like, you got that shit-eating grin on your face because you were pushing my buttons before we started.
Yes, I almost didn't tell you we were going to start. I just didn't want you to say something you shouldn't. I knew what to get you fired up with to make sure you were ready, full energy for this.
All right, I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Folks, Win, Make, Give time. Look, have you checked out the whole network? Have you gone to winmakegive.com? Have you checked out the other podcasts in the Win, Make, Give network? Because while Bob and I have the pleasure of leading the Win, Make, Give podcast, we've got many podcasts in the network for you on various different subjects. So check them all out. I don't have a list of them all in front of me, so go check them out. They're there for you.
Like, do you have a favorite? Like, are there these, like our kids? We're not allowed to have a favorite.
I have a favorite. Yes.
Is it 15-point plan because you helped launch that one, or something?
No,
different?
it's Achieve Your Apex because that's the one I'm still doing about the book. Yeah.
That's right. Oh yeah.
That was kind of a gimme there, Bob.
You can't. Okay. Pick somebody else's. Pick your
own.
All
right. And then it gets tough, right? I mean, Clint Swindoll always has been a mentor to me. Tell Me Something Good, part of the Win, Make, Give podcast network. Brian Gubernick with No Days Off. Fantastic. Short, quick messages that are hitting you, right? The 15-point plan. Jolene and I had a wonderful time bringing that message for so long. It's fun to watch Jacqueline and Ryan take their spin at it. Eric Hatch is there, right? I'm not even naming all of them, but there's some great podcasts, and I do my best to listen to at least each show here and there now and then. We hope Win, Make, Give is the one that you choose to follow. If you're only going to follow one, so make sure you subscribe so that you're here with us on each journey. And make sure that—
So real quick, because there's one in there that's kind of new, and you know, a lot of our listeners, Chad, we come out
new by the time this episode drops. Probably.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, that's true. A lot of our listeners are in the real estate industry. You know, that's where we came from, and you know, we definitely have some people outside of it. But there's a really good one called Lead Conversion Behind the Scenes with Robbie T. We were just talking about Robbie T. and Valencia, two really talented individuals in our organization who are like masters at converting sales leads. It doesn't even have to be real estate, you guys. The things they talk about apply to any industry. Like if I was a car sales guy making calls to leads from our website or what, man, they're really sharp. So I knew that I knew that one was coming, and I didn't realize that it got snuck in at some point. But yeah, Robbie and Valencia, really awesome. Lead conversion behind the scenes. Anyway, you can find them all at winmakegive.com, you guys, and the podcast network link up at the top.
There you go. And we hope that you'll share this one, this episode, any episode on any of those with people that matter to you. Bob, I am taking a course right now, always wanting to get better. I am taking a Leadership Academy class right now, working on getting certified so that I can bring the lessons from the Leadership Academy to other people. And one of the questions that came up during our most recent class was management, leadership. What's the difference? All right. And I think it's pretty obvious the difference between management and leadership. Yet I'm believing a lot of people think they're leaders that are managers. And then I think there's probably some people out there who are called managers that are doing a heck of a job leading. So immediately I had to throw it out to you and say, all right, Bob, what's the difference, management versus leadership? You gave me some great answers. We started to battle back and forth, and we've kind of compiled, as we love to do on Win, Make, Give, we've compiled a list, not of 5 or 10 things. So we have a strange number, as we usually do, but we had a list of things, Bob, that were kind of the difference, management versus leadership, for our audience to be able to listen to, jump into, share their thoughts on with us, and be able to become better leaders and, when needed, better managers. Because there is still a place for a manager.
Yeah, that's what we've been discovering, right? Like it's not a one's good, one's bad. It's probably more like there are times for one style and times for another style, and I think that's what we'll kind of suss out today, right?
Absolutely. If we went back in time, Bob, maybe when you and I were in our first job eras, not like the little kid 6-year-old job around that, but our first real job, it was much more management, right? There was very little leadership back then. It was management. This is the way we do it because this is the way we've always gotten done. The guy got promoted into that position. And yes, just the guy got promoted right into that position because he had been there for so long. Thankfully, during our lives, I think we've seen a massive transformation. When I was in this leadership academy and talking about it, I said, I've been so blessed that other than my first jobs, when I worked at like Sears, when I was like 16, I don't know that I've had managers. I've had leaders who have taught me to be a better leader, yet there are places for both. Bob, let's jump into this. I think the first one was pretty clear when I said, hey, Bob, leadership, management, differences. What do you think? You came back with this one right away at the beginning and gave us.
There's a leaders focus on like delivering a vision.
Yep.
And managers tend to become more focused on like tasks and prioritization and the things that need to get done in the job each day.
Yeah.
So, there's this clear kind of difference there where leaders are casting a vision and managers are kind of focusing on like the day-to-day of what we do.
Okay, where do you see that in your world? We'll get specific, right? You're a leader to some people / manager, right? For some, and you have leaders in your world and maybe / managers in your world. Bob, where do you see in your world management showing up with that focus on task versus leadership? And I know we'll just say it's Ben, right? Focus on vision. He's always looking 5 moves ahead in the game in that situation.
So Ben is interesting because I think he spends 90% of his time on the vision side of things, right? It's very, very rare that he's in my text inbox asking me like, what did he do here? But one of the times he will take a little bit more of a management posture would be, Chad, when there's like tight deadlines or a very specific outcome in the business that we're looking to go achieve. And he I don't know if he does it naturally but he will step a little bit more into like a management of what we're doing type of a role, but very rarely, right? Most of the time he is setting a vision, letting us know what we need to accomplish, and then sending us off to go figure it out. Right. But man, sometimes when he's like, okay, we got to get this done. It's got to be done in a week. He will step more into like, okay, who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Okay, you're going to have that done by Tuesday. And he's good at putting pressure on you then, Monday. Hey, you need is there anything you need? Any hurdles you need me to clear so that I can have that tomorrow by Monday? A little bit more management. But again, I get it. Like, we got to have this thing by Friday, and there's 5 of us that are working on it, right? So he's kind of, he's managing those different lanes so that we all, deliver by Friday. So, again,
could you handle a job in your life where it was a manager 100% of the time? Like, do you think you could survive in a job with a manager?
No, not today.
Or do you think Ben's earned the right to become a manager when needed because he's been such a leader that you understand when management shows up, there's a reason for it?
Yeah, more like that. And look, I think that we all get. I've been more being led, like you said earlier, Chad. Like I don't know that I've had a manager in my professional career, right? Maybe once. When I got into a little corporate structure when I was at market leader, for example, right? I did have a manager there. But so maybe back then I would have been more prone to be like, okay, like you can manage me, right? And I think when you get used to leadership, it's hard to go back to management. You are okay with it in a scenario like Ben because exactly what you said, like it's 90% of the time he's leading, he's doing the things that a leader does versus the way a manager might act. But I'm okay with him acting like a manager because I understand why it's happening there, right? I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, we got a deadline. Like, okay, I'm willing to be managed for us, as a group of 5 to all go knock this thing out.
And I think somebody needs to be driving the boat, right? Or driving the bus or flying the plane or whichever analogy you want to use for it. And at some point, someone has to speak up and say, I'm the driver. We're going left, everybody. This is what's going to happen. Yet earn. So folks, if you're out there and you're in a leadership, possibly and or management position, remember, one's not better than the other. Most people nowadays will prefer the leader over the manager. Yet we want you to understand the real difference is that a management is going to focus, as Bob said, on the tasks, whereas a leader is going to focus on that big vision. Bob, the second thing on our list we have here, and we kind of titled this one, and I don't know that it's the right title for it. We kind of said short-term goals versus long-term goals, right? Management's focused on those short-term goals. They almost can't see before Friday, right? This is what's got to get done this week. This is the stuff. Whereas leaders are saying, hey, here's where we're going to be next year. Let's grow this organization. Yet, boy, if we use Ben again as our great example, he doesn't like to set goals that far out. He likes to have a vision for it, as we said in option number one, yet he doesn't really like those long-term goals as much as he wants to set short-term goals, but not in a management way, right? He's aiming for a long-term vision growth goal, yet he's smart enough to bring it to where we can actually see kind of the next hurdle and the next hurdle and the next hurdle as we make that happen, right? What are your thoughts on that one, long-term goal versus short-term goal, kind of being management and leadership right there?
I think my brain just goes back to like, in our world, when does management show up? Because most of the time in my world, it's leadership, right? So like, all right, like when is the appropriate time to put on the manager hat? And for us, a lot of times it's around like a product launch, Chad, or a feature launch that we have, right? Where we're like, okay, it's the training group. Almost every time that there's some cross-departmental functions happening, right? Things that you tend to need a manager in that role. So like a product launch for us is a great example, right? We've got the design and dev team, you've got the marketing team, you've got the training team, and somebody's got to orchestrate all of that. Like, okay, is it done with dev? Okay, cool. It's got to get to the training group now to make sure that we've got all the collateral and the resources. And then marketing needs it at the same time because they're spinning up the campaign that's going to go out, and all the sales reps, right? There's an incredible amount of kind of orchestration of an actual thing tends to be done best by a manager, not just a visionary going, hey guys, we're going to launch a product and here's why we made it. And everybody's like, yeah, this is a great product. We're going to do it. And then he's like, go. And then it takes some management to get some of those things across the finish line. For us, product launch is one where there's absolutely kind of an orchestrator or a manager involved.
It's a great example. I think in that case, Bob, like you're saying, you can't have a leader in that case, right? You have to have the leader saying, we're creating this product and here's why. Yet if the leader, just as you just said in the example, says, now go team, right, and steps away, that's going nowhere. Someone needs to orchestrate it, to use your word, or be the manager in that situation. Okay, the third one on our list that we came up with, Bob, was?
Controlling versus inspiring, Chad. So like, here's how I think about this one and why I wanted this one on the list. We have this concept around here of like the fiduciary duties of a leader, right? We've heard these before. We did a whole episode on the fiduciary duties
way back when.
Of a leader. And one of the fiduciary duties of a leader is to, clearly set the standards and the expectation for what winning in the role means. To me, that's more leadership. Let's get them inspired. Let's let them know exactly what they need to do to be a winner, right? But the flip side of that, and the next principle of leadership or fiduciary duty of a leader is inspecting what I expect, right? So I set the vision. I'm like, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what winning looks like. We're going to go do it, right? But then I kind of got to manage. And so I don't know how controlling, but it's like, okay, did you do the thing? Right. And that check, that control mechanism, controlling is maybe the wrong word. There's a mechanism in there to say like, is this thing getting done? Right.
Yep.
That is a little bit more management. And one of the things that I think of like with Ben, like, and I got to go back a ways for this, and this is really a philosophy across our organization, Chad. Early on, you're probably being managed a little bit more. Right? Yeah. Checking in on your work a little bit more often. It's once an hour check-ins on day. The first day you showed up here in our organization, your manager, right? Your leader it's that person's playing probably both hats there, right? But they're managing you a little bit more, and as you prove that you don't need it, right, or that you get it, you understand, you're doing the things, it becomes less management and more leadership, and you move towards that, right? We would say around here, like, we earn the right to not be managed.
Correct. And that's great. And sadly, too many people just assume they should have the right not to be managed. I think earning it is the right way to look at it, especially somebody new to a new organization, even if they're experienced in the role and it's a new organization, because cultures are different, things are different when it comes to it. A great way this was put actually in a discussion that I had in that class, Bob, was it was outcomes versus output. Right? Management is looking for the outcome, right? Did we get exactly this? Did we do it this way? Did it produce this? Right? Where leadership's looking at, I don't care how you got from A to Z, just make sure we got to Z, right? They want the output.
Chad, I've maybe noticed something over my career. Most people, especially when you're in a new job, right? You're like, I want to fit in here. I want to do a good job. Most people need to be managed early, and they're not even comfortable with the idea of you being like, I don't care how you get it done, just get it done, right? Like, and leave it to them to go figure it out. Like, most people don't like that. Now, once they get comfortable in an organization and they realize that if they do make a mistake, they're not going to get fired, right? And then you can start to like manage them less and say, hey, you know what? I'm giving you this thing. You own this. You go run with it to the finish line. By the way, I don't know that you want to do that early if you don't know what that person's capable of taking to the finish line, right? So it becomes this, like, you're generally managing, back to the last point, you're managing and they're earning the right to ultimately,
Remember that, folks. When you're bringing someone new into your organization, that doesn't mean they're new. It just means they're new to your organization. They could be a veteran in the industry that you're in. They could be the best car salesperson you've ever seen with record-breaking sales, yet now you're bringing them to your dealership, right? They're new to your organization. So remember that they still need to be probably managed at first, earning the right to be led. Bob, number 4 on our list, we've got stability versus change, right? So maintaining the stability, the status quo. Management's really good at that. Management's really good at saying, no, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we're always going to do it. We're going to know that if we do this, we're going to produce that. It's going to just boom, 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 do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. Management brings that stability. They don't want risk. They don't want necessarily the reward that comes from it. They almost want to go unnoticed and just know that it keeps going, right? Leadership is driving change. Leadership is, hey, what can we do to make that better? Hey, how do we get to that point faster? Hey, how do we create something new that makes even our own thing obsolete because someone's going to at some point? So it might as well be us, right? Leadership is bringing us that growth and that crazy opportunities that are out there. Management's appropriate in the right industries. Right. Yeah, there might be some highly regulated industries, the IRS management, right? Highly regulated.
We have one. Like, I see this in our organization a little bit because we're now into mortgage, and mortgage is much more highly regulated, like, especially from the advertising side of mortgage, Chad, and what you can put on an ad and all the little disclaimers. And I mean, there's mortgage ads out there where you're like, what are all the disclaimers at the bottom? I can't even read them. They're so small. And then I know, like, in our software world, for example, when we're running ads, like, I don't have to, we don't have to have the marketing people check the ad as much, right? And so, yeah, like on the mortgage side, there's a person that manages the advertising campaigns because they gotta look at every last T and I, right? Or we're gonna get in trouble.
Yep, I would think the same in medical, things like that, right? There are things people have to. There are times where stability and dotting the I's and crossing the T's is required. So sometimes we do have to put on our manager hat, right? We are in, and we've said it, we come both from the real estate world. Okay, maybe earning an opportunity with a client, there earning that listing, maybe helping them. Okay, that doesn't have to be that leadership opportunity, but there's that part where the contract has to be reviewed, right? And there are contracts, there are legal disclosures in there. And that's where you'll get certain people in certain states, there's actually lawyers, real estate attorneys that are closing attorneys that do that stuff. In other states, there's escrow people who are reviewing all of that stuff. Management is needed in certain situations.
100%. 100%.
All right. Keep us going, Bob. Number 5 on our list.
Directing people versus developing people. I think about, we've got one kid in our organization that I kind of helped to get a job, and he's been doing a good job, and he's like on his first year. And, there's been a lot of times, Chad, where, and I'm not his direct manager, but whenever if somebody comes into our organization, I always feel like, man, I want to help them along. Sometimes it's by directing him to do things, right? Hey, do you see that? You should go jump in there and help out, right? Like, that's more of a management function. But I reached out to him. It was his year anniversary and at the company, and I'd seen it somewhere. And so I reached out. I said, hey, how's it going? Is there anything I can help you with? And he was like, I love my job, and I'm really interested in growing around here. And so in that case, I was like, all right, like, now let me try to lead this kid, right? And so I gave him some ideas of like, here's what I would do if I was sitting in your role, right? And because he'd given me an idea, Chad, of like what he'd like to do, right? Because we were going back and forth. And I'm like, well, where do you want to, like, what would the perfect job look like, right? And then I just gave him some advice, because he's a 23-year-old kid, right? And I think back to when I was 23, and I thought I knew a bunch, but I didn't, right? Like in reflection, at 23, I thought I was pretty sharp, but I was not. So I gave him a little bit of advice. I'm like, you know what? Here's who I would talk to. Here's the way I would position it, Jordan, if I was going to talk to her. So yeah, I mean, you're constantly, you're doing all of these things, like in a role where you have people that you lead or manage. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's very similar, right? Sometimes you're wearing the manager hat. Sometimes you're wearing the leader hat.
I think, Bob, the more and more you and I are talking through this, I think the more and more I'm realizing that we're not a manager or a leader. Now, there are managers out there, and they only get one hat, right? Yeah. I'm thinking of watching The Office or Office Space or something, right? There are characters that have a manager hat, right? Reading the Dilbert comics.
Your TPS report.
Yes. There are some people who are leaders, right? And they wear a leader hat, and they have that opportunity to many people to maybe just be a leader. The best carry both hats.
Yeah.
And they just know when it's time to put the right hat on, and they've earned the right for both hats.
I think they strive towards the leadership hat, though, right? Like
Absolutely.
Ben very rarely today has to go put the manager hat on, generally because he's hired people below him that can wear the management hat if needed, right? So I think over your career, as you try to become, the ultimate leader, the CEO, let's say, like you are moving away from the management hat.
Yeah. Yes. And the CEO still manages certain people.
Sure.
Right. There are times where, the CEO needs to manage a select handful of people. Now, yes, they might go manage others at a different level. Look, here's number 6 on our list. It's being risk averse versus risk taking. Let's put Ben again in that situation, right? This is a risk taker. Ben is absolutely right. That's the leadership of Ben. He is a risk taker. He's going to embrace risk. He's going to encourage innovation. I mean, he has changed the way many people do many things. He's created products to make things easier for people. There are times where we have both seen Ben go, whoa, time out, right? Slow down, right? I'm risk averse in that situation, saying, I want to do that, but I'm not going to just jump into the deep end. No, we're going to walk in from the shallow end and work our way through the pool to make sure we get where we go on this. And it's not, right? It's not that he's not a leader while he's doing it. He actually does such a great job of making you feel like, even though it's a management type thing to say, hey, we don't want change, he's looking at it more as a leader saying, hey, we want change. We just want to get there real slowly, folks. Back up on this one, because there are I's that need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed.
This isn't the first time that this come up in our discussion here for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's the first time I think one of us is calling it out. Generally you're not leading or managing in a void. You generally, like, there's a team, there's others you rely on, right? And I think this is the first time that I'm thinking like, I think Ben has done a good job of surrounding himself with a balance of people here. Because like in our organization, we have some people that are just more naturally inclined to be a risk taker, and then you've got some people more like, you know, Place is kind of our umbrella company, and our co-founders Chris and Ben are the epitome of this. Right?
Absolutely.
Ben is the risk taker. Chris is the more risk averse individual, right? And it's funny, in our organization, you even see that DNA on people. Me, a little bit more risk taker. I came up in Ben's side of the world. Holly Priestner, who leads our people team, a little bit more risk averse. She came up in Chris's world, and it makes sense. She leads our HR division, right? And
but look what you just said. She leads our HR division, yet she wears the management hat of being risk adverse in certain situations. And maybe it's because of her role, right? She's got to make sure there are certain things that are being followed, being done, or she gets, someone gets sued at a high level and stuff like that. She's risk taker when needed because she's a great example. She's someone who leads, yet at the same time, she knows when to say, whoa, time out. I'm going to put on the manager hat here. And I'm going to say, maybe we shouldn't change anything. Be a little risk adverse.
Yeah. Like there's just multiple examples of this in our organization. Like when we first hired Ross, our CFO, like he was the perfect balance financially to Ben's willingness to take, some bigger risks. Right. So, sometimes this ends up being other people that create this balance between risk taking and risk aversion.
And that's good leadership, right? To be able to surround yourself with people that are not going to just be the yes men. They're gonna balance you when need be for that. So that kind of it I want to say almost ties in very nicely with the next one here we got on the list, Bob. Number 7, you had
reactive versus proactive.
Yeah.
We think about this a lot around here. Like, when you sell something on a monthly subscription, right? It's software, which is what we do in one of the lines of our business. You are constantly looking for places to be proactive, right? Like you want the people in your world to put on their leadership hat and go, how can we be proactive here? Like, what could I do?
You used to do a great job of this, and you've shared this story many times that once a day you picked up the phone and just called someone and said,
I still do it to this day. Still
that's leadership. That's not management.
I try to be proactive. I want our team to do that. Like it's something we talk about around here as a philosophy, right? Is, hey, like, because I do consider everybody in our world has the ability to be a leader. I want them to show up like it, right? And a leader shows up proactively and says, hey, I think that I see you being a little bit frustrated over here. Like, let me help you with that. Oh, by the way, here's one other thing that I noticed that we can help you with too. Whereas reactive is just waiting for that problem to pop up.
Great point.
I think there's a whole discussion here around getting upstream, and the book Upstream. I don't know if Chad, if you've read that, but on this concept, right? Like you could just sit there and wonder, why are all these kids floating down the river, right? In the story from the book, or you could like walk upstream and be like, what's going on up here? Like, where are all these kids coming from? So managers tend to be more reactive, right? There's processes in place and they're waiting for the thing to happen. Leaders are going to look for that. Why is that thing keep happening, or how do I go meet it upstream?
A great quote Peter Drucker said that kind of sums up everything I think we're talking about. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things.
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong with reacting to a problem your customer's having. Nothing wrong with that at all. You should.
If a problem shows up, you better react, right? You need a manager who could then shift into a leadership role and be even proactive in going to that next step. But a manager needs to show up.
I think about David Wiggs, somebody in our world that like he is constantly. So he's our COO or something. I don't know what his title is, but he president of our software division is what he is, and he is constantly looking for things that our teams are always reacting to, which the managers are making sure it happens. And then he's figuring out a way to get proactive with those things, right? Like, man, if we're always reacting to this thing, is there a system we can build in our business or a model that can allow us to get upstream to try to go cut that off before that becomes something we need to react to, right? I mean, he's literally, that's his job around here, I think, is thinking about how we move from being reactive in places where we're seeing it every day in our business to getting proactive so we don't see those things.
And that brings to mind, Bob, back in our early days of internet training for people, you and I, both, if we go back way back when, what was it we would say to people? Look, if one client asks the same question that another client has asked, what should you immediately go do?
You go write a blog post about it, or just
Go write a blog about it, right?
have that content ready for the next time the question gets asked.
That's it. Nowadays, it's go make a video, go make a whatever site you want to use, because someone else is going. If one's asked it and another's asked it, you can be sure a third's coming up to ask it. Can you be proactive? That's a leader. A manager is the one who's just going to wait and answer that question every single time instead of being ready for it. Okay. I'm going to recap these, Bob, and then on to the last one. So focus on task versus focus on the vision. Okay. Short-term goals versus long-term goals. We kind of said sort of. Controlling versus inspiring. Maybe the word directing would be a better word there. Directing people instead of inspiring people. Stability versus change. And then we do have directing people versus developing people. Risk adverse to risk takers. Reactive to proactive. And Bob, I think the last one here, managers enforce the rules, whereas leaders are always challenging the status quo, right? Managers are following the plan and enforcing the rules. They're kind of saying, this is the way it's written, this is the way it should be done. And leaders are saying, well, let's create a new plan, right? Why do we have to go that way? Let's go this way. And they're challenging that status quo because they're looking at things and saying, just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean that's the best way now that we have technology. Look, when you were a kid, when I was a kid, I was the remote control, right? Dad would say, change the channel. And I'd get up and I'd click, 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 click. No, go back to that one, right? And maybe I'm just a few years older than you for that one. But I was the remote
my grandpa used to do that to me when I was like 4 or 5 years old. Yeah.
There you go, right? So that was how it was done. But that would be silly now to say to your kid, go change the channel. They'd walk up to the TV and they wouldn't even know what to touch to change the channel, right?
Mine has buttons on it. If they do, they're hidden back there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly, right? If you lose the remote, you're screwed. We have to understand that while that's a ridiculous analogy, okay, we used to have a telephone that was on the wall and you couldn't go more than 3 feet away from it. Now you can have your phone in your pocket everywhere. How many times did a math teacher tell you in class, because you're not going to have a calculator with you all the time. You need to learn this stuff. Okay, I have a calculator with me all the time, math teacher. I didn't need to learn that stuff.
Math manager? Should we call him a math manager?
There you go, whatever it is. Managers follow that plan and enforce the rules, while leaders are always challenging the status quo and looking to create a new plan. What's your thoughts on those, Bob?
I mean, it's one of these things where sometimes you got to wear the manager hat there, right? Like, back to the mortgage industry, or back to, where you were talking earlier about, a contract and closing, making sure the contract has all the proper addendums on it. Those things require enforcing the rules. But, thinking, like I'm thinking about, in our industry, we had this big change recently, Chad, with the buyer agent commissions, right? And there was one company out there. I'll just give them credit because I think what they're doing is smart. EXP. They just said, you know what? They got a little bit, like, they challenged the status quo. They're like, we're not even going to offer the co-broke. If you want it, ask for it in the contract, and we're willing to negotiate it, because they see still down the road some potential landmines with the way a lot of the rest of the industry has decided to make the change. And so, that's a really highly regulated thing. There's a lot of eyes from the DOJ on it. And these guys said, you know what, we're going to challenge the status quo in this, where almost everybody else went into management mode and said, we're just going to enforce these rules that the NAR is handing down to us. By the way, that's who got us into the position in the first place, right? And so anyway, so this one, again, there's a lot of places where we kind of got to wear the manager hat, but sometimes people are willing, and Ben's a great example, is willing to kind of step into the gray area to challenge the status quo when the rules or the laws aren't black and white, which most of them are not, by the way.
That's a great point. Folks, nobody wants to be managed most of the time. They want to be led. They want to be developed. They want to be given opportunity. They want to be shown the vision and let me figure out how I'm going to get there. Especially in today's world, the younger people coming up. My daughter and I were just talking the other day, Bob. She said the kids that are freshmen in university this year were the kids that were freshmen in high school when COVID hit. They've been brought up completely different as they got into that whole situation, the homeschooling, the working from home situations, their parents being home all the time, all that stuff. The world is different, folks. We need leaders. Sometimes, though, we do need to be managed. The manager has his eye on the bottom line. The leader has his eye on the horizon.
Love it.
And I think that's a great distinction for the difference between the two. We challenge each and every one of you. Be a leader. Be a leader to somebody, whether it's somebody that works with you, whether it's your family at home. Just remember, there are times where you might need to manage. Just don't stay there. Go back to being that leader. Earn the right to be the manager when it's needed. And as an employee, accept being managed and earn the right to be led.
Love it.
Until our next episode, folks, as always, do good.